about us what God's been doing over the last 2 weeks. And so, again, we're also at the beginning of processing in the sense of things that God did are still emerging and still being named and still being clarified, and that's a process. So this is like round one, attempt one. And then, but in that, knowing that you all have a desire to partner with us and come alongside us in the days and weeks, months, even years ahead is a tremendous gift and blessing. So that's some of the framing, some of the why. And yeah, I think that's all that needs to be said about that. Feel good about that. All right, cool. Well, Jesus, we just thank you for this time. We just thank you for these beautiful and amazing people who do love us, who do care about us, who have supported us. Feel blessed that we can come from the wilderness into a community that supports, loves, values us, is excited for what God has done and is doing, that's been praying for us. That is a true gift. And I pray tonight that you would bless this time. Just pray for each one of us just to have courage and wisdom on what to share, for hearts to receive and for hearts to give, and that this would be the beginning of a journey to carry forward what God's done. So I just give you this time, Jesus. In your name I pray, amen. All right. Well, so I suppose I'm first. All right. I can do that. You can step a little closer. Step closer. All right. Double A is the first thing, yes. Double A, Andrew Arnold. Okay. So I think there were two major things that I identified. Maybe three. We'll see whether I do this third one. Is that loud background noise? Hard to say. Yeah, maybe we just kill it. We're just going to sweat up here. We're going to glisten under this hot light. No, it's in my heart. So there are three. I'm going to say, I'll start with two, and maybe I'll name this third one. That I really, in thinking about transference and what God did in my heart on this course, that I want to share with you all, that I've shared with the team, and that I'm really excited for, actually. There's some really beautiful things that I think I was able to see more clearly for the first time, 43 years old. Sometimes it takes time. And some things that I'm really excited to move towards in this next season, which I know is going to have tremendous life and impact for me, my marriage, my family, community that is connected to me and that I'm connected to. Actually, I will share this third one as really the preamble or context for this first one. I have, as some of you know, I've been on this journey really for several years, but I think this one aspect of my journey in the last, really since the beginning of the year, the beginning of 2020, to begin to lean into this space with Jesus where I'm comfortable being with myself and being with Jesus when I feel vulnerable, when I feel weak, when I feel inadequate, when I feel unlovable or undesirable, or when I feel like I'm not enough. Like actually believing and then being with Jesus in that space. That's big for me because for many, many years, I've been very uncomfortable with what I perceive as my weaknesses, my inadequacies, my places that move me more towards isolation and hiddenness than connection and life. So the fact that Jesus and I have been on this journey has been transformative. Like actually believing that Jesus enjoys being with me when I don't even enjoy necessarily being with myself. Like, wow, he actually enjoys me when I feel inadequate and weak. When I want to hide, he actually delights in being with me. So that's been a beautiful, like, heart, mind, whole life experience that's been transformative really since the beginning of the year. And in that space, I think specifically on this course, there was a moment on this course when something inside of me, there was like, it was like a shift happened inside of me for a moment on this course when I went to a space in my mind and in my heart that was more of an old paradigm way of thinking about myself. It was a space where I began to feel this mounting pressure to lead and to perform and to do and be not out of who I am so much as out of who I think I should be, or what's expected of me, or what I think is best. So it was like I was almost separated from like the group, even a little bit of myself, like, oh, I have to make this happen. And I think historically that has moved me to a place where, oh, now I'm alone. I feel very alone. I feel very isolated. I feel very disconnected from other people. And as I move into that space, the pressure to lead and perform just increases. And as that pressure to lead and perform increases, the isolation increases, the sense of loneliness. Like, you have to make this happen all by yourself. And if you don't do it, no one else will. That's a kind of a crummy feeling. And I really haven't been able to identify that or name that very clearly until really recently, maybe as clearly as I'm able to name it now, except for this course. So it's always been like this narrative that I think I've felt and sensed, but never been able to clearly articulate. So when I'm in that space, I move away from people. I move like towards my own strength and capacity. I move towards isolation, performance, and then it's like, wow, you can't measure up. You'll never get it right. So all these narratives begin to fill in that space. So I was in this space, and I'm like, wow, I know this is not me, so to speak, in the sense of like, this is not my true self. This is not my best self. This is not my alive self. This is like a version of me, a part of me that isn't really full, that is maybe wounded or separated or disconnected. And I literally was like, why do I feel so off? So it's like these narratives were there, but I couldn't see them. And then I was like, and there was like a kind of like an epiphany moment, like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And what was so crazy is that revelation, nice, little moment there. Just let that be. Let it just, soak it in. Yeah. Let the concrete soak it in. Little spilled cup, no biggie. I think what I realized is that while I was feeling and experiencing all this internally, it actually was incongruent with reality. Because it all around me, I had leaders and people that actually were supporting me, that were with me, that did love me, that weren't absent, or they were leading. They were in this space of connection and support. But I couldn't see. I was blind to it because of where this narrative had brought me. So when I had this moment of like revelation, was like, oh, what I'm experiencing is not congruent with reality. And the gap there was like, oh, this isn't true. What I'm experiencing, it's true in terms of what I'm experiencing. It's not true in terms of reality. And I could then move to the reality. I could move to reality and expand my reality with truth and with reality. Like, actually, I am connected with Chelsea and Melita and Jacob. They're with me, and this team is with me in terms of the participants on the team. And I don't have to do this alone. I don't have to perform. I don't have to take the weight and responsibility on my shoulders to kind of make it happen. And I can move away from isolation to connection, away from pressure and performance to like delight, celebration, being okay with my perceived weaknesses and inadequacies. And it was like an aha moment. So so for me, it was like, oh wow, this is profound. My mom was praying that this course would be profound, and it really was profound. It was like, because I know what I experienced in my body, in my mind, my emotions, it was like a whole person experience. Now it's like, I know when I start to drift that way, it's like, oh, that's what this is. And I don't have to lean and move towards that. I can actually lean and move towards a different reality. And so it's been very liberating. It's been very freeing, and super, like, it's going to be transformative for me for the next 43 years of my life. I'm confident of that. So that was a big deal. And I say that it was in partnership with Jesus, because Jesus has already been showing me, like, hey, he delights to be with me in those spaces where I feel the pressure and the tension, the weakness, whatever. And now he's expanded that to say, actually, it's not just me that delights to be with you. There's actually a community that delights to be with you, and they can support you, and they can hold those realities, and they can be with you to help you grow and move forward. So I think that was like the next kind of big aha moment for me on this course. So that was huge. And so the second one is that, and so I'm not going to be able to share, this is going to be a little vague. Because it's important to contain things, but I'll give you I can share enough to kind of paint a picture. So sorry, we were talking about dreams at dinner earlier this evening with beloved Jesse Muir, and but I had a dream on this course, which was really significant. Like, it was one of those dreams when you know that it was so real and so important that God is like speaking to you through this dream, through your experiences, through like your story. Like, there was meaning making. And it was this dream where it was like I got clarity and direction about not specifics for my future, but a direction that God is leading me and my wife, Jessica, into the future. So it's really a dream about us and our togetherness and the way by which it was almost like a window, I wouldn't say a blueprint, but a snapshot into where God is inviting us into the future to deepen intimacy, to deepen connection, to deepen like meaning making and understanding, and grow and strengthen our marriage. So I'm super excited about that, because I know that as I lean into this and she leans into it and we lean into it together, like it's literally gonna change my life, our marriage, and like our future together. So it sounds pretty big, like that's pretty like a lot of hyperbole there. But I really believe it's that significant. And so I'm super excited for where God is leading us in this next season, and like to lean into not the dream per se, but I think the meaning behind that dream in terms of what is he inviting me. I already said that. I'm being a little repetitive. Me, Jess, and us together into that space. And so I just see that pretty clearly for the first time. Again, sometimes it takes a long time to see these things. We've been married 18 years now. But I'm excited for the next 18 years and then beyond, because I think this is the type of dream that, and really more the wisdom that comes from that dream and what the meaning making that will mark or set a course, a trajectory, an arc for our marriage. So really excited about that. And yeah, I think that's all I really need to say about that. So I would say thank you all for supporting us. Thank you, Jessica, Sarah, Flynn, Isabel, just for being my loving support. And I just really appreciate you all, and thank you all for the community. Just support us to be out there and allow God to move in and through us. And it was really a beautiful time. So, all right, I'm going to pause and who's next? We going in order? All right, Brighton, if you're ready.
All right, so I have 2 poems to share with you guys today. Little disclaimer, I don't consider myself a poet at all. I've never shared any poetry with anyone else before. And so in a way, sharing these is an actionable piece of what I learned on this trip. And I'll explain more of why that is as we go through. So I have 1 poem to start, and then 1 poem that I'll close with. This starting poem, I hope, is something that you can all relate to, and we'll just set a little bit of context for where I was coming into this course and kind of setting the stage. It's entitled, Eyes Can Smile. Fear grips the heart. Caution covers the face. Upturned lip corners replaced by lifeless cloth, but eyes can still smile. Eyes still laugh, eyes still cry. Depth of emotion, wells never dry. Depth unfathomed, the soul do they show. With kindness and grace, your sorrows they know. Fear not, my friend, connection's not dead, for eyes can communicate what lips never said. Eyes can still smile. So I wrote that on our second official day of course, second day being together. We were all sitting in the conference room there, and everyone, of course, COVID-19, has their mask on, and all you can see is their breath going in and out in their eyes. And I was thinking, so I worked here last summer. I knew a lot of these people. So I kind of knew their heart. I knew who they were. But I was thinking about the community that they had been last year, and then comparing it with community that I had back at home over the winter, and different communities that I've had throughout my life. And I was struck by the fact that the community here at SROM is unique. It really is a special place. The amount of life that we share together as a family at SROM is truly phenomenal. The amount of kindness and grace that you can see in someone's eyes when you actually look at them in the eye is amazing. And so I came into this course kind of with these emotions, these thoughts, knowing that SROM was a unique community and that I wanted to learn and continue learning and growing in that community. But also knowing the reality of what a lot of people were facing around the world, knowing the reality of what my friends were facing elsewhere. And so my head was in a lot of different places all at once, and I didn't really know what to expect coming in. One of my prayers for the trip was that I would experience a renewal in joy, particularly joy in Christ and joy in Scripture. I thrive on joy. If you ask my family, I've always been joyful, but sometimes it feels forced. Sometimes it feels like I have to put it there, and that's not where real joy comes from. Real joy comes from Christ. And so I came in wanting to experience that, but not really knowing what was missing. What piece, what portion did I need to work on? So I go into the trip. Second day in the field, I'm walking along, and we're just about to drop into the canyon, the actual canyon, and I'm having a conversation with AA. And in the course of this conversation, he comes up and he asks, when was the last time you trusted yourself? Do you trust yourself? And I thought, and I continued to think, and I realized that no, I trust other people really well. I can trust Christ. We actually got started because I was reading a psalm that morning that was talking about the Lord being my strength and how I could trust that Christ was my strength, but I couldn't trust myself. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand what that was about. And so that kind of set the course, or the trajectory for the rest of the course for me, considering this question of who am I, and specifically, how do I view myself versus who I am in reality? And you would think those were the same thing, but they're not. They're very different things. And so the whole course was, for me, a period of learning about how I view myself and how reality is different or the same as my perceptions. So imagine, if you will, growing up with an idea. And you have this idea, and you know it's true. It's a solid reality in your mind. And as you grow up, there are some people that affirm this idea and some people that deny it, but in your brain, you know that it's real. But you go through life, and the more you go through life, the more you hear the opposite of this idea. You start hearing things that contradict the idea. And you don't believe it because you know that it's real, but you keep hearing these over and over again in more and more prevalent ways. And eventually you start losing sight of the fact that this idea is actually real. And then it progresses and you start questioning, is it actually real? And slowly over time, it changes your perspective. Even when you don't agree with the idea, you still hold the original idea as true, but then this secondary thought is actually what's controlling your behavior. That's as close as I can come to describing what it was like for me. So I grew up in a Christian home, a very good Christian home, and I knew from very early on that that God was real and that I was a unique creation by God, called for a specific and special purpose. I always knew that. Over time, as I've gone through life, there's been lots of challenges, ups, downs, normal everyday things of life. But I had this internal narrative running around in my head that was more of a works-based idea and less of an identity idea. So my works-based idea was constantly telling me in subtle, small ways, you have to do this. You have to be that. And I didn't believe it, right? I have this idea that I hold as true, that I am a unique, special creation. But this insidious idea keeps popping up in small, subtle ways. And slowly, without even thinking about it, I still hold this idea that I'm a unique, special creation as true. But the way that I actually began to view myself was if I, how do I say this? One moment. It was through a lens of weakness. We talked on our course a couple of days in about shame narratives, and specifically the way that shame functions within our life. So shame takes us and it starts feeding us a narrative. It feeds us an idea, and this idea usually relates something to who we are, to our identity. And this narrative basically goes on a loop, and it tells you the same thing over and over and over again. And as it tells you that thing, it prompts you to try to defend yourself from this idea, but the idea itself starts putting up barriers for connection with anyone else. So I had this shame narrative running around in my head about choices that I'd made, decisions that I'd made, that I knew were wrong, and they were wrong. But I started to believe that those choices defined me, that those choices were who I was. And so even though I would still say I'm a unique creation of God, that I'm loved by God because God forgives all sin for those who call on his name, I still affirm it, right? But the way that I live my life isn't functioning like that. I'm now trying to get out of this cycle that I'm caught in, trying to stop making choices that I've made, etc. All the while telling myself that I have to stop these things before I can come back to God, before I can come back into community with others, because that's what shame does. It isolates us from others. So I had these narratives running around in my head, and slowly over time, they changed the way I interacted with others. They changed the way I was interacting with God. And that was really the source of the lack of joy in my spiritual walk, because I felt like I had to perform, and since I wasn't performing, I couldn't be accepted. Ridiculous. But that's the way that I was functioning. So I come into this community that I talked about, that I knew was gracious, that I knew was kind and accepting, and that I knew loved the Lord. And there's a freedom in that type of community. So one of the unique elements of wilderness trips is that you're spending 15, 18, whatever we did, days together with one group of people with a common goal and a common purpose. And within that purpose, one of the things that we held dear, we decided at the beginning of the trip, was authentic community, which includes vulnerability, seeing the best in others, working to grow each other in joy, in grace. And so you enter that type of community, and there's a freedom and also a responsibility. The responsibility is that you really can't hide. You can't hide in that type of community, so you have to show yourself. The freedom is that when you show yourself, they do what a good Christian community should do. They accept you, they love you, and they grow you. And so coming into this type of a community allowed me to explore this part of myself that I sort of on the fringe of my mind knew existed, but didn't realize the impact of. It allowed me the freedom to explore what it means that I view myself through a lens of my weaknesses, through a lens of my deficiencies, and what it would look like if I viewed myself through a different lens. And so throughout the course, these are the thought processes that are going around in my head. As we talk about leadership and who we are, it all kind of flows together. We did a solo in the middle of the trip. And the solo was probably the hardest part of the trip for me. But also, in reflection, one of the best parts. I've always loved spending time in the wilderness, often alone, and it's been a place where I can connect with God, where I can renew my joy in being a son, a place where I can be myself really and truly and remember what my first love is, as John says. So going into the solo, I thought that that's what this would be, and it wasn't. Within a couple hours of being on the solo, the shame narrative that I had talked about, which I'd been exploring a little bit throughout the trip, so I knew it was there, but it took over. And it started telling me the same things, and I started realizing that I believed it. And that was incredibly difficult for me. I wrote down in my journal, God, I don't know how much longer I can continue fighting this. And I didn't. As I lay down that night, I was up higher, and I had 3 pillars of rock on either side of me, so I was kind of up on this saddle. And I lay down in my sleeping bag, and these swifts, very small birds, started playing, and they would go in and out of this saddle, coming feet above my head. And I was watching these birds go back and forth with such grace, with such freedom, and with such beauty. I didn't think about this at the time, but in reflection, if God created birds to have grace and beauty and freedom, didn't he create us for the same thing? I believe he did. And so that set the course for the later half of the course, which was exploring what does it mean to believe that I was created with an inner beauty, that I was actually created in the image of God. What does that mean? What does it look like if I actually believe that about myself? That I'm not defined by the choices that I've made, that I'm not defined by my weaknesses. What does it look like to live like that? And there's incredible joy and freedom in that. Because as I realize that I am a unique creation of God, I can start moving towards others in that same way. Right? I can start loving others freely, giving myself to others freely, which is something that I couldn't do before. And so In a way, it accomplished both my goals. It brought me back to joy with Christ, and it brought me closer to others, better able to serve others. So my final poem is a reflection on the course. We were discussing at the very beginning of the course acrostic poems. So this is an acrostic poem. It has 15 lines for the 15 days that we were on our journey. And it's written from the perspective of, I'll just read it. A crying call, come walk far. Be brave, my son, to walk in faith. Creature created, imperfect, weak, dwelling in darkness, desiring release. Enter the wilderness, look for me. Faltering steps fraught with fear guide you to me, and there you begin. Created beauty, undiminished, dwells within. Gently your affections I'll win. Follow me to freedom from fear. Enter my rest, know that I see. Dwell secure, you're my masterpiece. Curious creation, your soul do I seek. Be still, my son, in beautiful faith, and peacefully rest in who you are. God can take us from our homemade prison cell, because that's what it was. It was a homemade prison cell. I had confined myself into it, and he can free us from that. He can free us from our choices that we've made, from our decisions. He can free us from who we think we need to be in order to succeed. And his freedom is light. His freedom is joy and peace, peaceful rest. We talked a lot about shalom on the course. His freedom is shalom. So there we have it. My journey.
What's up, guys? Tough acts to follow, huh? I don't have any poems for you guys. I might have some tears, though. I've kind of been in an emotional state today. So, yeah, I mean, what do I take away from the course? What did God do? To give a little context for those, who weren't on the course, who've kind of heard some of this story. Really like the kind of the season I've been in, I stepped away from full-time ministry last June. And, there's a lot I could say about that, but ultimately, I was just burned out, just drained emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and then that was beginning to manifest in some pretty severe physical ways. And so I stepped away, transitioned out of my position last June, so coming up on a year ago. And, you step away from something like that, I had some confusion, there was some kind of jadedness, some cynicism from some of the things I'd seen and experienced, and just the utter exhaustion, really. And, and so over the course of these last 11-ish months, it's kind of been this slow process unfolding of processing that, of, finding moments and pieces of healing, kind of it's like a big ball of string and you begin to kind of tease it out, and you pull something out and you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't as long as I thought. And other things like you pull one, it all just unravels and you're like, what do I do with this, So for me, I came into this trip, I guess, kind of wrestling with some questions. There's some questions that have been on my mind for a while. And in some ways, so a couple of the questions, I wondered, is healthy, authentic, sustainable, and real Christian leadership even possible? I went to seminary and studied leadership strategy and theory and all of that there. And, from some of my own reading, I did that as well. And, it's like, so the theory, but it's difficult when you don't see that modeled necessarily by people maybe that you're serving under. And then even to, have so many peers who seem to be caught in this sort of tension and this, I don't know, this grinder, really, this sort of system that just seemed to just grind pastors up. And, so you begin to wonder, like, is this even possible? Or is this a bunch of crap, And then I even, began to wonder, okay, maybe it is possible, but is it worth it? The pain that I felt, it's very real. And you just begin to wonder, is it even worth it to put yourself through this to gain, do you believe, that you're gaining something that's worth what you put yourself through? And as I kind of kept teasing those questions out over the months, what probably scared me even more was when I began to wonder, like, is it even worth it to follow Jesus? Because the things that I experienced, like, it became very difficult the more I processed it to, like the last 6 years that I was in that position, that experience had sort of molded so closely with my own spirituality. And it became difficult to separate the two, and so when I think following Jesus, I'm thinking of stress. I'm thinking of expectations put on you by others. I'm thinking of this sort of feeling that you're living in this glass bubble and everybody's sort of watching what you're doing. And, they can maybe throw darts at you, but you can't, you can't throw darts back. And, just the endless needs of others. And, I just, at one point, a couple months ago, I was journaling. I was like, Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I'm like, man, I have not felt that for a long time. And so you begin, you just begin to wonder, like, is it even worth it? Because you see all these other lifestyles and they're like, well, that looks a lot easier. It might look funner, more fun. And so those were kind of some of the dark places and questions I was wrestling with coming into this. And there was even, to some degree, probably an avoidance of Christian community to some degree, because it didn't feel safe anymore. Again, because of my experiences. And I mean, I have like a few close friends that are always kind of there. But as a whole, it's like, it's kind of it's a hard place. And it's a very isolating place because you're like, I'm kind of sick of all this like naive Christian crap. Just being honest. These little cliche things and all these like fake people. And again, I'm not saying you guys are like this, but I mean, this is just raw emotion, right? And, so I was sort of avoiding that to some degree, and it was hard to engage with that. And on the other sense, like, I was hanging out a lot with non-Christians and, wasn't really engaging in their lifestyle, but I was like, man, I feel like I can be myself here. I don't feel judged. Nobody puts expectations upon me, and I can just kind of be myself. But yet you also don't feel at home there either, because like, I'm different. I have the Spirit of Christ within me. And so, like, I don't fully engage in their beliefs and their lifestyle. And so just a very isolating place. And, I had kind of come through briefly last fall and had kind of some brief interactions with Strom and some of the people here. And, it's a God thing, but, call it a hunch and call it whatever you want. I felt like there was something for me, here, something God, needed to do in me and probably still needs to do. And I even, with that sort of like Christian community, like I'm kind of sick of it. I know I need it. I know it's such an important part. And I really felt like the glimpse that I saw of Strom and even Rock church, I was like, all right, that's real. I feel like, and that's a safe place. And so that's kind of like what I came into the trip bringing and thinking about. And so, like, what did God do? Bringing it back to the question, what did God do? What am I taking away from this? I wish on my solo, like, the presence of God just knocked me out and I had a vision and, I woke up and everything was fixed in my life, right? I wish that's how it happened. But, it didn't this time. Not yet. But I walk away, I walk away with a lot of things. And a few of those things is one, I feel, there's a joy. I laughed a bunch on this trip. And, one of the realizations that I've had for a while was like, man, over the course of this kind of long 6 to 8 year season, I feel like I've just been robbed of my joy and robbed of peace. And, I've been aware of that for a long time, and I've thought, how do I get back to this, God? And I don't fully know. So if you guys know, tell me. But that book we read about returning to joy resonated with me. And, I'm getting glimpses and bits and pieces, and slowly, it's being restored within me. But so, yeah, even just laughing a bunch, goofing around a bunch on the trip was like so needed, for me. So I walk away with some of that. I walk away with renewed hope. Renewed hope that life-giving leadership is possible and it's worth it. And I've really been touched by I've just really been touched by, Andrew, and I just know how hard it is to be authentic when you're a top-level leader, when you're the one running things. And so to see him walking in that and continuing to move towards that, and I don't know a lot of his story, but I just know there's usually in anybody who's been in any pastor or ministry leader's life who's been in ministry for any amount of time, there's betrayal and there's hurt and there's people that just leave you. And I just know there's a lot of stuff there. And so I don't really know, a lot of Andrew's story, but unless he's different than any other ministry leader or pastor I've ever known, he probably has some of his own experiences of that. And the fact that he's still moving towards what he's moving towards and that he's still walking in what he's walking in has really deeply touched me and inspired me to be like, all right, I know it's not going to be easy, but it's possible and it seems to be worth it, And so that's something I carry away for sure is a hope and an encouragement and an inspiration for that, because I was feeling pretty uninspired. I also just been reminded of the power of Christian community. Like I said, there's some jadedness and some cynicism that I carried into it, and it's not to say it's all gone, but I know, it's like I know Christian community is so valuable and so important, and it has touched me in so many ways throughout my life. And so it's just maybe a reminder of that, and just again of like, hey, it's important to be a part of that, and it's important and worth it for you to do what you can to cultivate that as well. So that's another thing I take away from it. And I guess probably the last thing I would say is like I said, I didn't get knocked out in the spirit and wake up and have everything fixed. And there are those breakthrough moments, and I pray I have, I've had those in the past, and I pray I have more of them coming up. But I know also that there's a lot of things in the Christian walk that are processes, and roads you have to walk out, and you can get tired along the way, and as I've already said, uninspired, unmotivated, cynical. And I just feel a renewed motivation of like, okay, I don't know what the future holds, and I don't fully understand how to fix all of this, and maybe that's a bad mindset to even have of thinking of fixing it. But there's a renewed motivation to keep pressing in to Jesus, to keep, pressing into good community, and, to keep working through my own stuff as well. And so, yeah, I guess I'd say that's kind of like my main takeaways. And I'm thankful, really for Strom. I think Brighton mentioned it. But, it really is a special community that you guys have here, and even the greater Laramie, some of the Rock Laramie, and some of the other churches maybe that other people represent. But, I've been around enough to know that you don't find this everywhere. And so I feel grateful to be a part in some small way of it, and, that the Lord has brought me here in this season. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, that's another tough act to follow. My name is Rachel Engel. And yeah, I'm gonna actually, maybe that was God's purposes, but there we go. Can you hear me now? Okay. Maybe that's part of God's purposes, but I'm gonna continue on the theme and start out by reading a few verses. Worn out, tired, burnt out on religion, come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Yeshua. So a theme for me was, that phrase that really stuck with me was unforced rhythms of grace. I think there was a few different things, but the first few questions, are you worn out? Are you tired? Are you burnt out on religion? I could answer yes to all three. And so I was really seeking this rest, this renewal. And the desert had been that place for me before. A new adventure, new friends, new people. And ironically, God was also teaching me about how he's used the desert with his own people. And when you're in a hot, hot desert, you learn a lot about what it means to live in a dry and thirsty land. Especially on our last day, when we did a slot canyon, which was really fun and really cool. That was our reverse peak, because you don't go up, you go down. And we packed what seemed to be reasonable water, but towards the end, all of us were starting to run out. And you can feel that like dryness in your mouth. If you wait for long enough, you get a metallic taste the next time you drink water. And so God really showed, the first miracle he showed with them was bringing them to water. The people of Israel had to learn to follow God's voice to the point that they, thirst is one of the first needs that we recognize. If we don't have it, we're not going to make it. That's like the first ingredient for life. And Jesus really said, I'll teach you to live on every word that comes from the mouth of God. So that was really my goal. I was like, just learning that God could teach you that. And he could use the dry and thirsty lands to teach you to desire, to hunger and thirst for that pure, clean streams of living water, streams of life. So I think what was really like highlighted to me was the solo time. And it was just very interesting what the Holy Spirit, what I really learned on this course was he truly is a wonderful counselor. And it was giving me just enough puzzle pieces that I could handle at a time and put the connections together. And then it'd be like, I know you like the puzzle pieces, and I'll give you more when you're ready, but just these for now, And it was just ironic that, like, some of the things we talked about, literally I'd been considering about just a little bit before. And so the Holy Spirit was one step ahead of what I was doing on the course. And so that was really pretty cool and really actually culminated in my solo. And I grew up at a Christian kids camp, surrounded by forest. My closest neighbor was like 12 miles away. And so I became very comfortable with the woods. That was like my second home, if not my most primary, like, safe home place. And so when you spend a lot of time in God's creation, you attune to nature. You learn the rhythms. Everything in nature knows what it is, and what it does, except for us. We seem to have a hard time with that. But, so it's just really natural. And, you have the rhythms, you have the sun rising, you have the sun setting. There's time for work, there's time for play, there's time for rest. And it's flexible enough that you don't have to fix it in this little time slot. The same space that could be used for rest is the same space that could be used for play or for work. And so it really works with you. And then learning about, you become friends with the plants, you give them names, and the animals, and you name them too. And they're just really naturally attuned to, like, these rhythms of life, They've been taught well by it. And taught well, if they go against it, that maybe not so good things happen. And so we call this, they're so attuned, we call it instinctual. It's just what you do. And really for me, I believe and I recognize, knowing those, that creation is under a curse. And I think a lot of God's natural rule and reign is manifest in what he's made. The waves and the wind obey him. Of course, he created them. And so he knows how to talk to them, how to work with them, and when to work against them. And really, it's a pretty magical place. I think at one point, several times we had like this like cotton kind of floating in the air. Like sometimes it creates this, like, it's almost like snow, but it's not cold. So some on our team really appreciated that, I think. But yeah, so there was kind of like a verse on solo where I just allowed myself, one of my other teammates really taught me the value of time. And I've never been really great about having the right timing. So I just trusted that nature would kind of guide me of when to do the next thing. And ironically, I had a few different goals I wanted to do, and it all perfectly lined up in the end, which was pretty cool. But the verse that I was thinking about was out of James 1:2-5. And it's, consider it pure joy, my brother, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all, without finding fault, and it will be given to him. And I think just that word, I was playing with the word of invitation and specifically unforced. If you're unforced, then that means it's an invitation. You don't have to do it. You have the option, and you can say no, and that's okay. And so I really liked that word, consider. Think about this. And so I think thinking of my own, really, like, in the NIV, it has the heading on that part as, like, trials and temptations. And so really thinking about my own, like, trials and temptations and recognizing that, like, I don't really think, or at least it's hard for me to really consider those pure joy unless I have the time to really rest, to review, and to really revel in God. That's another part that we often see the 10 Commandments as a list of rules. And as God was teaching me, Ray Vanderlaan, website that the world may know, has a really great series called There's Hope in the Desert. And he really walks through this, and says it a lot better than I can, but that we always see those as a list of rules, but really God's people saw it as actually like a marriage vow. And it was really God's way of saying, I love you. And taking the Sabbath day of rest was really saying, like, I made you for this, to rest. Like you just said, like, I did not make the Sabbath for man, but man for the Sabbath. Or I might have mixed that up, but basically, like, the Sabbath is there for us, not for us to serve the Sabbath. Which it can often become, I don't know, I've experienced that in Christian circles, You're more trying to serve the Sabbath than allowing that to be a great unforced rhythm of grace. And so, that was, before that I had learned I didn't want to burn out in ministry. I had been close to burnout before coming to SROM. And I knew if I did not take that dedicated rest weekly, I would burn out. And in doing that, I just recognized how good it was, how wonderful it was, how sweet it was, and that I could really just enjoy God's presence and provision. I didn't have to worry about trying to make the world happen, to make it all be okay if I wasn't doing something right then. And so I'm going to do something kind of unique, and maybe my teammates can help me. One of my teammates taught me the song that's often sang on Shabbat, the seventh day, that we sing. I think I'll just talk a little bit about my plans and then maybe end it with that song. So like right now, going into this, and there's still a lot that I really need to process from this course, honestly, and I will really need those Sabbaths. There's just a lot of different themes and things that I'm working with. And I think anytime you get closer to pure joy, the accuser, the deceiver, is close by. So I just plan to, I find it very hard to take a full day. There's always something to be done, right? And a lot of times it's like you just have the weekend and you're like, crap, well, I've only got these 2 days and then I go back to work. But trying to do that. And then I'm going to try and at least do a Sabbath dinner. I've learned more about that. And one of those cool things as well is that you start the dinner, I guess, by pouring little things of wine into the cup. And each time you pour something into the cup, you say something you're thankful for. And that was a demonstration of when David actually says, my cup overflows. You fill it until it overflows. And most people, what I learned about is the disciples were probably pretty weirded out. I mean, Jesus does some really weird stuff, but probably especially weirded out when he said, this is the blood of my covenant. Because that was in Jewish culture, that was the way that a guy proposed to a woman. So they're like, why is Jesus proposing to us right now? Basically, would offer that cup, and then if the woman wanted to say yes, she would take the cup and drink it as well. And it was basically saying, like, I will lay down my life for you. So I think I want to do that and slowly invite other people for like a Shabbat dinner, and at least do that, and kind of create that rhythm. And then once a month, I'd like to try to actually like get a full day, including like a night out in God's creation, just to be really reset. Psalms 24 says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. And really, that's a divine reset. He restores my soul. Just like how you're a little scared to reset your phone sometimes. But it's actually can be really good and really cleansing. So, if my teammates are willing, I guess I'll start it out. I've got to... Ready? Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Hey!
Yeah. All right. I don't think I'm going to sing or dance, but that was so wonderful. Thank you. I definitely think that my mind and everything from this trip is still just kind of a swirling mess and whatnot, and things are starting to settle. So I think a little backstory is I've been in ministry for a long time. I've moved around a lot to different ministries, and I definitely feel like that's where God wants me to be, is serving in some kind of ministry, especially in media for some reason, because he keeps calling me back into that, which is okay because I don't mind it. And he's given me the skills for that. But the other theme that's been running alongside that for a long time is kind of this feeling of not being worthy or loved. And I know my wife can attest, we've had lots of conversations. I know the importance of community and relationship, especially for real life and growth. I think we can fumble through life kind of by ourselves, but it's going to be a fumbling. It's going to be messy and it's going to take you a lot longer. You're going to learn the hard way a lot more. And I don't know when I started realizing that, but I know that it's something that God has put in my heart, that I just desire like good relationships. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be working here at SROM, be a part of this community, because I do see that relationship and community is so much more important than anything else that happens. Because when that is good, everything else is just going to flow and be good as well. And I've definitely worked at different ministries where it's kind of the flip-flop. It's like, we got to get this done, and the community relationship stuff is kind of second nature, or the second priority, or maybe further down the line. And I don't think I've gotten burned out on ministry, but either I've started to realize like I'm not in a healthy ministry, or God has just naturally kind of led me and my family to a new ministry. And I know even when I found out about SROM, I was kind of like, why in the world have I not known about this before? Because I would have been here a long time ago. Although I also realize God's timing is perfect, because I know that SROM has been in a lot of transitions over the years, through the great insight of others who have come along and joined this ministry. And yeah. So coming into this WMPC, there was this kind of hope that this trip would be really transformational for me and eye-opening. But I also, because of past wounds, past experiences, and some truth to it, like I wanted to not set too high of expectations. And it's interesting because, I wrote down on the whiteboard when they took my picture before the trip of like some things I wanted to do, and it's interesting because like one of them I wrote down was affirmation, and I was definitely thinking more from like maybe God. I don't know. I wrote it down. Not sure what I was thinking then, but this team, Andrew, the other leadership, and even my fellow students, they have definitely been encouraging to me. So it's been great. And some of the reasons I know that is because in my past, there's definitely times when, that narrative of not being worthy, unloved, or even unlovable. There's times when I'd be with people who like would come over and want to hang out with me, like, hey, are you doing okay? Why don't you come join us or whatever? And in my mind, I was like, well, you're just doing that because you're wanting to be nice. You don't really care about me. And I would kind of like put myself down. And even after that, there was times when like, if I had a really good day, I almost like felt guilty for that. And I would kind of like tend to do things that would help me feel maybe like, oh yeah, okay, I am kind of unworthy or whatever. Just not stay in that place or whatever. And definitely not a healthy place. I mean, most of that's been years ago, but still there's the residue of that running throughout my life. And I know a long time ago, God taught me that I don't have to move or go somewhere different to find good community, to find good Christian people to be around and to have relationship with. But that doesn't mean that community and relationships are easy. It takes time and intentionality, and it takes something that you can't control, and that's the other people. And God has definitely put some people throughout my life to kind of help pour into me, but they've always kind of been a little bit temporary by nature or just the circumstances. Being an overseas ministry or doing like a set time period ministry thing or whatever. And even though on this trip, like going into it, I knew it was like, well, it's only going to be this long. There's still this cool idea that, at least a few of the people on the trip are here. They work here or they live here, So I'm going to continue to see them a little bit. And I've been really impressed with Andrew and his leadership and just who he is and where he's going with his life and his relationship with God. And so there was a sense of like, it's not going to be all temporary, but again, try not to set too high of expectations. But it was a great trip, a good pause to kind of like pause some of the things that have been rather just rough in a way. Part of that is my wife and I, and it was totally a God thing, and we enjoyed it. We got led to go over to Africa for a couple of years, full-time missions, and we enjoyed it, but there was definitely some hard things, both being there and then even coming back. And I know it especially hit my wife, I think, harder coming back than she necessarily realized it would. And I definitely didn't realize. Transitions have always been a little bit easy for me, I think. But part of that is because I've kind of protected myself and just been like, it's not like I have much that I'm leaving behind, so it's easy for me to transition or whatever. But it's definitely been rough with one of our daughters and her health, and my wife grieving the seeming loss of this long dream of being in Africa as a full-time missionary, and now being back here. And it was totally a God thing. I mean, perfect timing. We needed to be here for my daughter's health and some other things and for rest and rejuvenation. But that didn't mean that it wasn't hard. And kind of lost my train of thought. Coming into this trip, I definitely was kind of like Andrew, like I kind of wished, and I a little bit hoped that like maybe I would have that mega God moment, like he shows up just so clearly, speaks so audibly or whatever. That's like, okay, this is clear, and even though maybe it wasn't super clear, there was definitely some whispers. One in particular that was interesting was leading up to the trip. We did some stuff around the building, preparing for the trip and different things. And I was here and Andrew was here helping out, and I overheard Andrew and Laura Albright, who works here full time, talking, and she was encouraging him. If I understood the conversation enough before I came into it, was just don't be afraid to boldly pray for things on the course, for God to show himself in bold and surprising ways. And she had kind of mentioned that she had done that, and I think it was about seeing some big game in Grand Canyon, I think, or something. And while she was on this course, bighorn sheep were there, and it's like something maybe you don't see normally, and she got to see it. And so she was encouraging him, and I jokingly was like, well, I want to see a giraffe in Escalante, because I'm like, that's not going to happen. And she was like, well, don't count it out, because maybe you'll see a giraffe-shaped cloud. I'm like, that's a little iffy, like I could, postmodernism, you can make anything be whatever, So leading into the course, it was kind of on the back of my mind that I had in jest had said that. And oddly enough, I saw a giraffe. It's still maybe a little bit up to interpretation, but Andrew saw it. So so the story to that was, I had a GoPro on my trekking pole to get some footage along the trip, and It was on the independent student travel part, so it was just us, just the students doing things. And all of a sudden, we're coming out of the creek up onto the bank again at a river crossing, and I look at my trekking pole. I'm like, the GoPro's gone. And it was like everything was gone because it had been attached to a bracket thing, and I knew what had happened. Like the bracket had broken, and I was like, "Uh-oh, that's not a cheap toy." And there's some really great footage on there, and I was like, I don't want to lose that. So it just kind of went into go mode of like, okay, we're gonna go back down the trail, and try to find this. And Brighton was nice enough to run with me because we're both kind of camels that we don't need to drink a lot or eat a lot, and we can just keep going, which served us very well in that specific time. But we went back down the trail, and it was really great how both of us were able to kind of backtrack our steps through the brush and not clear trail most of the way back. We even ran into the instructors who were keeping their distance, coming up behind us to make sure we were doing okay and being close if we needed them. And then they helped look for a little while. And I knew there was at least one point, like a boundary that was like, okay, I remember this stop. I at least had it then. So that was as far back. And it was maybe, 2.5 miles, 2 miles-ish back. So we had gone back pretty much all the way to that point when we ran into instructors. And the instructors helped us look. And it was in that time, looking for the GoPro, going back towards the rest of our student group, that there on this tree trunk, somebody had not followed LNT practice, but had carved in some things. I think there was a couple trees that had some initials, but in the middle one, it was like a horse figure, but with an extra long neck. It was like, and nobody else saw it first. I saw it, and I think I was just like, huh. Or I just.
You said, no way.
Yeah, I was just like.
And I'm like, what? Did you find the GoPro?
Yeah.
You're like, no. I'm like, well, then what?
I was like, there's a giraffe. Yeah, I was like, no way.
What?
But there's a giraffe. Like, I'm looking for the GoPro, but here's a giraffe. And he was like, no way. Like, it is. Totally is. And I didn't necessarily savor that moment. I'm still thinking I'm processing that moment a little bit. Because I was like, I still got to find the GoPro. And the instructors paused because they didn't want to get up to the rest of the group too early. So they're like, we're going to break for lunch. You guys go ahead, and we'll look too as we come up behind you. And it wasn't maybe 100 yards or 50, 100 yards after that. Brighton was in front of me. He walked right by it, and I'm walking up, and there it is. And I see it. And it's like tucked into the brush on the side of the trail, and there's a stick kind of there hiding it a little bit, but I saw it, and it's like, and I just screamed really loud, one, to tell the instructors, hopefully that they would be like, we can interpret that as he found the GoPro. But yeah, it was just a really cool moment, like, because both the instructors were praying, I prayed also a little bit in jest, that, God would help us find the GoPro. I was also, the prayer to find the GoPro for me was in jest because I kind of had confidence that I could probably find it on my own. And that's another theme, I think, that God's been revealing, that I don't have to do it on my own. And the really cool thing, too, that I started to realize, too, in the past, when, I could see groups that I was kind of connected to, maybe off laughing or maybe just up ahead talking or whatever, there's this longing like, I'm missing out. But I'm not welcome or something because, I'm not lovable or whatever. So that shame cycle would kind of start. And it was interesting because those times happened, but I didn't feel that way. Like I realized like in my past, I would have been like starting to get sad, feel unloved, unappreciated or whatever. But I was like, I'm okay. And I think part of that was because I got to experience some really good, authentic community. I knew that this team loved me and they cared about me, and it wasn't there was nothing malicious, nothing like we're gonna go over here and keep Adam out of it because he's not cool enough, or whatever. Like those lies that I knew without a doubt that wasn't the case. And so it was easy for me to just notice those thoughts, but be like, I'm okay with it. And to hold that. And that God's really, through the trials and tribulations over my years and different things, has given me some great strength to keep an even keel, to have some strength to hold things. But I definitely I have seen, and I'm really seeing, and I'm excited about getting to not have to hold it all by myself. I would love to move more into a space with my wife, because I know that she's a more sensitive soul, try to put it kindly. She just feels way more deeply than I do. And part of that's because, I armored myself a long time ago. And so I think I try to protect her by not putting too much of my burdens on her sometimes. But I do want to move towards us being more free to talk about things and to be more vulnerable and weak and open with each other. And I'm excited to, continue to work here with Andrew and Jacob full time. Jacob and I definitely connected in a lot of different geeky ways and whatnot. And we're like pretty much the same age. So there's a lot of similarities there. A lot of things we can relate on. So looking forward to getting to hang out with him more. But all in all, yeah, there may not have been that like big moment. And I'm still processing through a lot of those things, but there's hope. There is life, and I think I believe that, but I think I was losing some of that belief before this trip. And so coming back from that trip, just having some renewed hope and joy is a good thing. And I'm excited about that. And I don't know what's going to happen. And even coming back to that whole point of like, I wrote affirmation down, and I know I'd said this, but just even in this today, we took some time to encourage one another and do some really one-on-one talks to like for the instructors to pour into my life and encourage me of things they noticed. And that has definitely been one of my favorite parts of the whole trip. Because it was just good to hear some of the things they were saying, and also to not be judged in that, like to say, hey, it is a process, it is a journey, and you don't have to have it all together right now. You don't have to have these amazing moments that just shift everything. Like, there is a journey, there's a process, and it's okay, and we see the beginnings of that. And they were saying, like, we're excited for you, and we're excited that we get to continue to be a part of that because you're here in the office with us. And that was just encouraging. So, yeah, I don't know. That's some good stuff.
Oh, wow. My name is Melita, and wow, what a course. Before we left on this course, actually no, previous to this course, I was in Israel for 2 months, and I had this dream about 3 years ago of hiking the Israel National Trail. And dreams have been really hard for me because I've lived a lot of my life in disappointment. And it's been easier to not dream than to be disappointed. And so I've just like, much of my life, I've just like cut off seeing into the future, and I've been like pretty low places, and so looking to the future isn't awesome because it's pretty hopeless, you know? So I've spent many years there, and for the last 5 years I've been coming out of that place. Maybe it's more like 7 by now, but coming out. And yeah, and so like this piece of disappointment's been a pretty big theme of my life. And there's so many Psalms that talk about like telling our soul to hope in God, right? And don't be downcast, but hope. And I'm just like, a lot of my life I was really cynical, and I was just like, psh, whatever. And so yeah, I started dreaming. A huge dream that I've had for the last 3 years was to hike the Israel National Trail. So I planned this trip to really just do a solo backpacking trip, and then a friend joined me kind of at the last minute, which was phenomenal because I dislike traveling by myself, and I love sharing experiences, so I was stoked. And we traveled from Eilat, which is at the tip of the Red Sea, through the desert, the Negev, to the Dead Sea, which is right around, I don't know, like 350, 400-ish miles. No, it's like 350 miles-ish. Anyhow, and so that's about half the trail, because it's about 1,000 kilometers, or 700 miles total. And so we get there when the height of COVID hit Israel. And it was a huge disappointment. We were just hitting our stride. We weren't fighting as much, like those kinds of things. No, we were just like, we were learning how the country works, how the transportation works, and we were just like getting our trail legs. So we were like ready to pump out the miles. My blisters had healed. And yeah, we were just like ready to roll, and it hits. And my friends like, Melita, like, if you don't have a plan, you're soon gonna be stuck without public transportation. So like, what's your plan? And I'm like, I'm backpacking. Why do I need a plan? But then like water became inaccessible, and food, what we weren't able to access at kibbutz. And so it was just like, yeah, it's becoming too much work to just like get our basic needs met. And I listened to my friend and made a plan. But the whole piece of like not being able to continue the trail was this huge disappointment that just like triggered a lot of stuff from my past. And I say all that to say, yeah, that's like I came back from Israel 2 weeks before leaving on this course. And so I was kind of holding all that and still like wrestling with the Lord in that of just like, okay, God, like, what the deal? Like, you invite me to dream, and then you send COVID. Like, the whole world's disappointed, really, but I am too. I know, right? And so he gives me this verse in Psalm 77, where really at the end of the chapter, he says, your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. And for some reason that just like hit me, and I'm just like, yeah, like I'm on the path, I'm following it. Like I've seen enough processes to not give up at this place of disappointment, but like I sure don't see your footprints. So what the heck? And yeah, so then we're journeying through Death Hollow, which is this beautiful place we refer to as Life Hollow. Just because there's not very much that resembles death in it, because there's water and all good things. And so we're journeying, and I had my camp shoes in the back, these fine things, in the back of my pack, and I'm often very good at like clipping them in, because Christmas treeing is like a no-go. But there's tons of brush, and I had them like jammed down in my pack, but apparently not secured well enough by the laces, and I lose one of my shoes. And like these aren't even a year old, and I value footwear very much. People around here can testify, like repair them endlessly until they're like gone. And like the tread on this is still really good. So I'm like, what? And I love them. They're ultras, like go ultra, wide toe box, all these things. And I lose a shoe, and I like wear my sunglasses and just cry when I find out. I'm just like so sad. And it's like, again, like this disappointment. This is day 3 or 4. Something like that. Like a 14, that's a lot. Camp shoes are valuable commodities. Because you're like sick of your boots, and our boots are wet like 24/7. So anyhow, sad day. I lost my shoe, and I shed tears twice at least. And I wore my boot once or twice at camp, and then I was like, okay, I'm sick of wearing my boots. I'm like getting a brush burn on my heel, because of the sand and the wetness and wearing my boots. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to last long. And so one day I made my Moki sandal. Woohoo! It lasted 10 days. And it's getting a little thready. Yeah, I'm proud of this thing. It sweats. It's not very breathable. So I'll just got it up. But yeah, I was proud of it. And I mean, I'm still trying to find out how this ties in, honestly, because it's really like this place of disappointment. I can't do this all summer, so I'm gonna need new shoes, and I don't know what like what. But yeah, thank you for your faithfulness, Moki Sandal. This is his memorial. It's very sandy still. Yeet. Was that right? Was that right? Did I do that right? Yeet. Okay, yeah. I learned that from your dad. Yeah, Gen Z. Oh, yes. Oh man, Parker. Yes, that was last year. So, and then there's another piece of loss, which we did have a moment of silence for, which my hot water bottle that I got in Alaska fell one day out of my coat because I was keeping it warm, and it died. Split open. So I'm like, what's up with this loss? And Debbie Downer right here, like, I still don't really know. Like, I'm like, God, like, you invite us to dream, and then they don't, like, it doesn't work out, right? And so I really still have a lot of questions in that. But I'm stoked. And I'm just like, okay, in this place of, like, real disappointment, like, what's next? And, yeah, tons of questions around that. And I think right now where I come to, both through this course and through my journey in Israel, is just this place of, like, I hear God saying to Moses, like, what's in your hand? Like, what do I have to do right now that he's given me that I can put to use? And Moses' staff is in his hand, right? And God tells him to, like, release it, right? And it becomes a snake. But a theme for me right now is just like Switchfoot's song, Strength to Let Go. And it says, give me the strength to let go. Give me the strength to surrender. Give me the strength to stop holding on, because I've been holding on for so long. And so I think a lot of these pieces and themes fit together somehow, of just like God inviting me to step into things that I want, but also to let them go. And what that looks like, I don't really know. But yeah, I'm excited to keep exploring that. So that's been one really large theme. And yeah. Another huge theme for me this course has been what many people mention, actually, of like this piece of like leading from a place of mutuality. And like when I find myself in places where I'm like alone, or feel like I'm leading from an alone place, or just feeling alone in general, like what do I do with that? And yeah, just like an awareness piece that he's brought to my attention recently of like, there are people around me that he's invited me to ask for help for, or to. And they might not always be like in my immediate life. It might have to be a phone call or 5 phone calls, but they're there. And I think just like that mindset of like believing that they are there and they want to be there with me. And I'm worthy of that companionship for sure. Wow. Yeah. Is a huge piece. Yeah, and just like that permission to be in those lonely places. And I feel like I'm going from here kind of asking of like, what do I believe about myself in those places where I feel really lonely? And how do I step into those beliefs and like purposefully, like make choices and invite others into that place of loneliness. Like the loneliness isn't bad and it's a normal piece of life. But how do I move towards others in connection in those places? So, yeah, I think that's it. And I'm definitely still on the path of following where there's no footprints. because I really don't know what's up next in my life. But I'm glad to be here.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know how many times I've stood up here now. How long we've been doing these parties? It's been a while. But I think this is around like my 40th course with SRAM. Wow. Oh yeah. Getting those numbers up there. And I think I'm probably getting close to 2 years worth of field days. And so like I feel in a lot of ways like doing this in a lot of ways would become easy for me. And running our courses has become quite easy. And this was really hard. And I think, last year was tough too. And I'm still not sure how much I even should share and how much needs to be processed out and what's appropriate even right now. But I guess I can start with thanking all of these people and Andrew for an amazing time. It's really been a privilege to spend time with all of you. And I've learned something from every person. So you all have so much to offer, and it's a blessing to have been on this journey with you. And I say that coming from a place on this trip where I feel like, as strange as it sounds, like I feel like I didn't have much to offer back. And I'm guessing they don't feel that way, but like that's what it feels like to me. And having done so many trips and feeling like I'd not necessarily arrived, but gotten to a place where feeling like my competency was really high, and that I could roll with the punches with pretty much anything that was thrown at me, and could troubleshoot and could pick up whatever slack I needed to pick up, and it was never a big deal. And for many, many reasons, like way beyond the scope of this course, I felt like my capacity for all of those things had been really diminished. And so in places where in the past I'd be eager to stand up and lead and take on more responsibility, in a lot of ways I felt like I was giving responsibility to other people, especially Melita. So like I think in some ways, like when she says like feeling alone in leadership, I think a lot of that's on me because I wasn't able to actually like be what I wanted to be for her as a co-leader. And I think in some ways, like as a metaphor, like you ever see like the waiters like cleaning tables like after like a big group, and you have like the two like big trays full of stuff that you're just like carrying off to the kitchen. I kind of feel like leading to this course was like I was doing that, and then someone just chucked a baby at me. And I'm like, I guess all this is going on the floor. And and so like even though like you're kind of catching the thing that's coming at you, like you still like are very aware of all the stuff on the floor. And so like as I'm trying to navigate this course as an instructor and trying to make this the best thing that I know how to make it, like I'm finding like all the stuff on the floor is like really distracting, and it takes away a lot from what I felt like I was able to offer. And so I think there's lessons in that. I think there's something really valuable in that, and a few folks have commented on this idea of like feeling weak and like what that experience is. And I don't think that's an experience that I've felt a lot in my life. And it's like definitely a humbling thing. And I think it's even maybe a little more humbling when in a lot of ways you feel like that's the thing that gives you value. You know? The thing that and I've had conversations with some of you about this. But I think as a man in America, that's like a pretty common thing. And I know where I'm from, it's like, to be a man, it's like you have to be someone who can get things done and provide. And that's kind of like the mark of what manhood is. And like when you feel like you are not able to do that, like you have to start thinking about things differently. And I'm not sure I've worked through that process yet. I think I'm still trying to figure out exactly what all that means. But like there were still like other surprises in the midst of that. I think maybe my biggest win for me was to be able to like manage within like that capacity that I had. Because like even though it was hard, I felt like I was able to bring as much as I could. And kind of like walk the line between like being totally overwhelmed and totally checked out and like I'm over this and we're done. And like burning out on like day 3 because you tried doing too much. And then on the other extreme, just totally checking out because, it's kind of scary to like, push yourself when you feel like you don't have a lot to give. And so I think that was like a lot of my experience, and I was able to do that with these guys. And like they're kind and gracious and people that you would like to have as friends. So they'll be around, and so you should get to know them. But yeah, definitely a blessing. And so I feel like I should say something to make this like feel like a little more upbeat and exciting and less of a downer. But I think that's, about as honest to my experience as I can go. And it wasn't always, or I don't know if it was ever an easy trip for me. But I think it's going to be something that I'm going to continue learning from for a while, that those of you who have done SRAM trips before, like what you get out of the trip frequently goes well beyond the end. And we've even got letters, from former students like years after their course, talking about what they had learned and how it had impacted their lives. And so I'm anticipating for me that that's what this course is going to be, that as I start unpacking some of this, that it's going to be fruitful. But right now, it's a little squirrely. Maybe kind of like Adam was saying, it's like just like little fuzzy things are kind of blended together. I'm still trying to pick up the stuff off the floor and make something out of it. But thank you for praying for us and, supporting this, because, I get to go out in the field and do the, I guess the adventurous, wild, fun part. and we have a lot of people who are doing things in the background. And, our support staff, you guys are awesome. And we couldn't do anything without you guys, so thank you. And all of you who pray for us. I mean, it's felt. So thank you.
Okay, everyone. Disclaimer, I hate talking in front of people. My heart is like beating lots right now. So, but one thing that stuck out to me in this course was when we left, Mary prayed for us, and she kept praying this word, like profound, like in the spirit, like that vibe with it. And I think for me personally, it was a very profound trip. And I came into the trip with this idea of really wanting some wisdom up in there. And I think all the time, like my mind is always thinking through many things, like how do you hold this and this? What does it look like to hold these things? And in the idea of learning from wisdom, I came to me on this course that knowledge that is lived into and engaged with becomes wisdom. And it's not just knowing these things or seeing them far off, but actually engaging with them that moves it into wisdom. So I was starting to think through that. I was like, okay, so how do I hold wisdom without being utterly overwhelmed by all this knowledge that I want to live into? Because that's hard too. So the more you engage in wisdom, the more you have responsibility to the wisdoms that you live into. And so then I'm also thinking about this with leadership and blah, 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 all these things. So then I come to this idea of like, wow, like what is the beginning of wisdom? And it is the fear of the Lord, where there is this grand distinction between the whole, it's beautiful, but it's like the creator distinction. And that the first piece of wisdom is that there is a difference between God and humans. And one of the things with that I thought through was that one of the areas of distinction and difference is that God has been at all times and all places, always moving, always holding things together from like past, present, future. And I am only in the present. And so I was thinking about that and how like to engage in that with like leadership and joy and all those things. And the first thing when the Spirit moved over like the depths of the waters was he began to create these separations. And then God began to show himself in a way that's like, wow, like God knows when to create and he knows when to strip raw and he knows when to do these things. And there's this ability of knowing when is enough. And so then and how he started humans was saying, hey, you rest first. That's all. Like before you create, before you strip down, before you move, you rest. We've had like a lot of theme of that. And so for me, rest has always been this interesting thing. Like I don't love to like rest in terms of like the typical understanding of rest. I'm like, nah, like too boring. So what does rest look like for me? And what rest looks like for me is, I was thinking about this concept of like play. Like what is play and what is joy? And one of the primary components of play in our brain, I love the brain, is this idea that there's no consequence with play. So there's no consequence or punishment or things where reality hits you in a place that will carry on from there in like a negative impact. And so really what I'm recognizing is like I need freedom to rest. I need freedom and joy to actually move me to rest, which then moves me to distinction and boundaries and wisdom and engaging in knowledge to move into things. So it began to be this like trajectory, and I felt so thankful because all those things came into this like connective experience on this trip for me, where I felt like I was able to live into joy and freedom and play in a way that's like together and mutual, in a way that moves me to the present, like keeps me where I am not savvy over the past and what that means in people's lives or the future, but just in the present. And how to live in a leadership with that capacity is not as overwhelming. Still moving to that, but is not, you can hold that. Like we can hold that as humans with that. And then I just felt like, wow, like another thing I've been thinking about this year. In the beginning of the year, God said something along the lines to me, like that he is active in goodness. And I'm over here being like, God, I think you're pretty passive, and I think you're kind of not doing anything. And so I like movement, and I like speaking of rest, right? I'm like, okay, God, so like I believe that I'm a mirror of you in rest and life. So like, where's your movement? Where's the activity of goodness? Like I believe that, but like I need to see that. And yeah, so I think there's been this movement where I've been able to see that God is very active in goodness, and He's not there to overwhelm us, and He's not there to make us burnt out or dry. Like it's really actually to be like life-giving. And then I was thinking about, last thing, don't worry everyone, it's all coming together. But as like leaders or humans as a whole, we are mirrors of each other. So then I was thinking about, wow, like in my leadership, if I am a mirror where I cannot hold these things, or I'm overwhelmed with holding all these things at once, which means that I'm actually trying to live into God and not humanness and all these not great things, then how are the people that I live and engage with not going to feel that for me? Like if I don't actually believe these deep things or move to wisdom, right? Where it's like, wow, do I believe that I believe this about them and this about them? Like, can I hold that? Then how, like, what is going to be mirrored besides something unsecure and actually not human? So I don't know. So there's been like a lot of like pieces of wisdom that has like come about, but it's come about through freedom and joy and yeah, like a lot of hope in that. So anyways, that's what I learned from this course. So, but yeah, so thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for being a part of it. I think just like close us out in that, and then you can come in second close. But we are just so appreciative of you, and I think just the ability that you all come again and again authentically and show up and support us and like love us and pray for us. Like it's truly touching, and it really moves things. Like truly, like the Spirit of God is moving like people and us, and I just think it's so wonderful and beautiful. So thank you for being a part of it in all those ways.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. He's just making sure I know we still have a slideshow and to rein it in. It's my second speech.
Won't be more than 2 or 3 hours.
2 or 3 hours. Settle in, just breathe, relax, get a cup of coffee. Okay. But in all sincerity, I do want to echo that. Thank you to all of you. You are a gift, a treasure, a blessing.
And all those who are watching that would have liked to come.
All those that are watching, you're in our hearts. Mwah. We love you. Feels a little awkward.
Imagine your sisters on viewing.
I love you, Aim. And I don't know. Yes. So, and I just want to thank you all. Just Chelsea, Jacob, Melita, you are amazing. Just co-leaders. To co-lead with you is a gift. I want to thank you all for showing up and showing up on course, throughout the course, and showing up tonight. And that, what I mean by that is you led with your authentic self, your best self, your true self, and that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. And I'm deeply blessed and encouraged by you all. You amaze me. You're beautiful human beings. Wow, what a gift! That was a sacred moment. That was a sacred time, and I just I'm feeling very full right now, full of joy and hope. We are gonna close. We'll stop the